Hi, graphic design. So, we're going to learn about atmospheric perspective and the image trace tool. This is going to be what our goal is to create. So, we're going to make a scene with some mountains and some bats. It's going to be lots of fun. So, on the Google Classroom, you guys are going to have 4 pictures that you need to download. So, download the 2 mountains, the bats, and the trees. And then you'll also download the template that will look like this. The template will not automatically have the images. You need to download the images and place them into Illustrator on your own. The way that you do that is you need to make sure that you do file place, because if you do file open, all of the edits that we'll need to do to the photos will not work. So make sure that when you're putting your images into your Illustrator file, that you do file place to get all the images there instead of file open. So once you have all your images in the document, we're going to go ahead and get started. So the proportions of this artboard are the average proportions that you would need to create a phone background. So I don't ever want us to create things without a purpose. So as a graphic designer, your goal for this is to make something that would be an interesting background on your phone for like a lock screen or your home screen. And that's why I made it this proportion where it's like tall and skinny, because that is the average size that an image would need to be to fit well on the screen. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the first mountain. So we're going to use this guy right here. I'm going to go ahead and move this guy over so that way you can see the instructions. So with the image selected, I'm going to use image trace. So that is a button that's located right down here. It just says image trace. It's in the properties panel. When I do that, I want to select the preset of silhouettes. The reason that I want it to be a silhouette, you'll notice here, it just immediately made everything that was a color a silhouette or a black image. And then it made everything else that was in the background see-through or transparent. So now that I've done that, that preset does a pretty good job, but most of the time the presets are not enough. We need to edit that preset to get exactly what we want from the image. So let's go ahead and click on this little button over here in the properties tab it kind of looks like a to-do list. Like it's got a little box and then a line and a box and a line. So go ahead and click on that guy. And you're going to get a pop-out that looks like this. This pop-out has a couple of options on it. So it's telling us which preset we chose. It's telling us the view that we're looking at over here is the tracing result. So it's giving us a preview. And the mode is black and white. So the first thing that we can edit here would be the threshold. And for this particular preset, what that means is that the threshold of how much Illustrator needs to recognize as the final image. So what that means is our image was a colored image that was a JPEG, and when you do silhouette, it makes it black and transparent. So however high or however low or more or less you change the threshold is how much of the image will be black versus how much of the image that's transparent. So if I make the threshold less, then look at all what happened to my mountain. All of that light areas that were in my mountain, I'm telling Illustrator, oh, actually, I wanted those light areas to be see-through. And so it's changing the amount of light and dark that it's recognizing for the portions of the image. So I don't actually want my mountain to look like this. I do want my mountain to be like a solid shape. So I'm going to leave the threshold more towards the more category. And then we're going to go to some advanced settings. So we're going to click down here on this little arrow for advanced. And we're going to change a few things. So paths, if you guys remember from when we did the pen tool, when you click once, you make an anchor point, and then you move the pen tool and you click again, that makes another anchor point. But the part in between your anchor points is called a path. So if I want to have a more detailed outline of my mountain, I would add more paths, because that would mean that I would also have more anchor points. Okay, so if I wanted it to be less detailed, if I wanted it to be more smooth looking, then I would move the paths to lower, because that would mean that it's going to give me less paths, which means I will have less anchor points. So let's just see what happens when I drag this guy all the way down. So did you look at my mountain? Okay, look, it's detailed, and then now it's very smooth. It's very detailed if I go over here, and it's very smooth if I go over here. Okay, I want to find someplace where it feels detailed but not too much. So maybe somewhere over here would be good. The next thing we're going to talk about with editing the presets is corners. Okay, corners means the type of anchor point that it's creating. So remember when we used our pen tool, when you click once, it makes an angled anchor point. And when you click and drag, it made a curved anchor point. So for corners, you're controlling, are there more angles or are there more curves? Okay, so if I do more corners, then all of those anchor points in there will have more angled edges. And if I do less corners, then all those anchor points in there will have more curved edges, which is kind of hard to tell in a preview because you have to actually be looking at the individual anchor points. Okay, so just trust me that we want to have our corners be somewhere in the middle. So we'll have like an even amount of curved anchor points versus cornered anchor points. And then noise for this particular image won't do much. So we're going to leave noise alone for now. Now, what we've been doing is editing this image into a vector file. However, it is still a JPEG. It has not been saved as a vector image yet. Okay, right now you can tell that because it still has the bounding box going all the way around everything with an X through it, which means that it's still a JPEG right now, right? So in order to make it save as a vector shape that we can edit, we need to expand. So we're going to click right here where it says expand. And now I can edit this shape. Like if I wanted to, I could zoom in here and go with my direct selection tool and then look at all of those fancy anchor points that we just made that I could definitely move around if I wanted to. Right? So if I click on these anchor points, I can drag these individual anchor points wherever I want. I don't necessarily need to do a lot of editing on this right now. I think it looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and move this guy to our artboard. I'm going to put him somewhere around here. And then when we resize this, we can definitely resize it while holding shift. Or we could kind of manipulate the proportions a little bit. Because it is now a vector shape that has anchor points and paths and fills and all that kind of good stuff, because it is a vector now, we can stretch it and make it bigger and move it all around and do whatever we want to do to make it look what we want it to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and just make it like a little bit taller, just by a little bit. Stretch it out this way, something like that. Okay, so now I need to recolor it, and basically what we need for atmospheric perspective is for everything that's closest to us to be darker. And as things go farther away from us, they will get lighter. Now, the reason for that is that everything that's in the air, like all those particles in the air, the fog, clouds, like oxygen, everything that's in the air blocks our view when it gets far enough away. Right? So the reason why things that are closer to us appear darker are because we can see all of those tiny little details. Okay. And when they get further away from us, everything that's in the air blocks our view. And so it appears to get lighter. So that is the definition of atmospheric perspective. And we're going to do that with our colors on our mountains. So I do want this mountain to be the darkest one, but I don't want it to be black because that's what we're going to use our trees for. So with my new vector shape selected, I'm going to double click on my fill. And I'm going to change this to like a tealish color. And I'm going to make it real dark. So not all the way black, but very dark. And I'm going to press OK. And then you're going to go, oh no, what happened? My shape doesn't turn colors. It's still gray. Yes. Okay. So when we made it into a silhouette, it changed the color of that image from something that has colors to black and white grayscale. So we need to edit the colors of that vector. So with this selected, we're going to go edit colors, convert to CMYK. So basically all that means is it's going to bring our colors back. And CMYK is the acronym for the colors that we use in a printer. So it's cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So I'm going to click that guy. And then now that I've done that, I can try again over here to make a nice dark teal color. And now it works. Okay, so let's just copy this mountain and make it a little bit bigger for our second layer. Okay, so I'm going to right click, transform, reflect. I'm going to reflect it vertically, and I want a copy. So I'm going to copy it. And now I have another mountain that's the same, but I'm going to stretch it out. So I'm going to make it taller, maybe a little bit wider, and then put it behind this guy. And we're going to change the color so that it's lighter. So it's already the same color as the previous layer. So I'm just going to double click on my fill and make it like a gray and say, okay, maybe a little bit lighter, just a little bit. Okay, so now I need to send it backwards so that it looks like it's layered behind my first mountain. So I'm going to right click, arrange, send to the back. And I might need to do some adjusting so that the mountains look good together, but that's generally the idea. Okay, so here's our two mountains. And the next mountain is going to be the other image that I gave you. Does anybody recognize this mountain? It's from Disneyland. It's the Matterhorn. Okay, anyways, with the Matterhorn selected, we're going to again click on image trace. We're again going to select silhouette. And you'll notice that we have holes in our mountain. So remember when we talked about the threshold that is the automatic preset for silhouette? What that threshold recognized was, oh, the snow on the left side of this mountain is the same color as the sky. So you must have obviously wanted me to remove that. Well, no, computer, I did not want you to remove that. I actually wanted it to be one solid thing. So we need to adjust all of our presets. So I'm going to go with threshold and make it a little bit less. Sorry, I lied. I want to make it more. So I'm just going to gradually move it up until I get rid of most of those dots. You'll notice if you move it all the way up that the illustrator is just like, oh, you want the whole thing? You want the whole thing to be black? Is that what you wanted? And you're like, no, Illustrator, that's not what I want. So we're going to drag that down to get something that'll look like this. And it's not going to get rid of all of those dots, and that's okay. I have a plan. So what we want to do is make sure the edge of this mountain is detailed. So I'm going to give it more paths. I'm going to give it more corners. And then I want the noise, just so that you can see what it does, to go down, right? So let's just look and see what happens. Do you guys see how all of a sudden I got a lot of more little tiny dots on my mountain? So the noise refers to the texture of your image and how much of that texture will show through. So if I bring it down less, then it gives me more of that texture. And if I bring it up, then it will get rid of that texture, right? So I do want this to be pretty high. And then that's probably about as good as we're going to get with removing those dots. So let's go ahead and expand. You cannot forget to expand. You need to expand in order to edit your shape. Okay, so now that we have our shape expanded, the next thing we're going to do is Shape Builder. So with my image selected, I'm going to go to Shape Builder, and I'm just going to click and drag through all of these so that they will all become one shape. And I can get rid of all of those pesky little dots. And we're not going to be able to get rid of absolutely all of them. Like these ones here aren't going to be able to get filled in because there's a gap at the bottom, but we're going to cover that up with our previous layer, so don't worry about it. Okay, so once your mountain is looking like this, then we're ready to move it so that it fits in our artboard. So I'm going to scoot it over here. I do want my Matterhorn to be recognizable, so I'm going to resize it while holding Shift so that it will maintain its proportions. And then if I wanted, I could stretch it just a little bit. Okay, so I could come up here to the top, stretch it out a little bit, because then it'll be taller. Okay, so again, I need to make this lighter. So with my new fancy vector selected, I'm going to actually use eyedropper. So I'm going to come over here to my eyedropper tool and select my previous mountain so that they're the same color. And now I can double click on the fill and make it lighter. So this mountain will be the lightest layer. So it should go dark, medium, light. And then I need to send it backwards. So I'm going to arrange, send to the back. And I might need to move some stuff around to see if it looks better. Yeah, I think this looks pretty good. Sorry, I'm just editing, I'm just futzing. Okay, so let's go ahead and add our first layer. It'll be in front of these mountains, which will be our trees. So I need to explain that this tree image that I gave you is a much higher quality of an image. When you first place it onto your screen, it's going to be really large. And that's because of the quality of the image that I had you download. So the higher quality image that you have, the better the tracing will be because of all of the extra information that we're giving the computer. However, because we're giving the computer extra information, it's also going to take longer to create the outline, right? To create the tracing. So please be patient with your computer when it's doing image trace on large, high quality images. It will take a long time. If you do something that's really complicated. This one's not going to take forever. However, if I start clicking on other things while it's loading, our computers will get mad and they will crash. Okay, so we're going to do the same process. I'm going to select my trees. I'm going to do image trace, silhouettes. It's going to tell me, hey, this might take a while because you chose a large picture. And I'm going to say, yes, I did, and press OK. It's going to load. and then I'll get a fancy image trace of my trees. So now that my trees are traced, I could go through and change some of these presets. So let's just say I wanted them to have more paths. The computer's going to think about it. It's going to apply that. Maybe I want less noise so that it'll have more little dots in there. So you see I got more like detail up in there. And then if I like the way this looks, I'm going to press expand. Do not forget to press expand. And then I can move. We're going to leave the trees black because they need to be the darkest layer. So we're going to leave those the color that image trace created them. And we're going to put them just right in front here. So we can probably make them bigger. I'm going to hold shift while resizing these because I don't want to mess with their proportions because they are so detailed. If I stretch them out, then it will be very noticeable. So we're going to do something like this, which means we're ready for a background. So I'm going to go with my square tool, my rectangle tool, and make myself a square that looks like it covers the background. And I want to do a gradient. So let's go ahead and click on my gradient, double click so that the pop out happens. We're going to select linear gradient. We're going to click and drag so that it goes up and down. But I want this to be darker on the top and lighter on the bottom. So I'm going to switch that by clicking this button. And then we're going to change the colors. So I'm going to click on black, and I'm going to use this eyedropper that's in my gradient pop out to select my medium color for my mountain. And then I'm going to make this white color just like a grayish, like a light gray, like this one. I think that'll be good. And now I can probably make this gradient a little bit lighter because the background should be the lightest layer. And if I like the way this looks, then all I gotta do is arrange, send to the back, and now I have a fancy image here. It's starting to look like it's almost done. We have a few more things we're going to do. So first of all, my lightest mountain is kind of getting lost. Like it's blending in with the background back here. So what I could potentially do is edit this gradient so that it's lighter. But I don't really like the way that looks because I want this to feel like it's at nighttime. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to add another element here by creating a moon. So I'm going to do a ellipse tool. I'm going to click where I want the center of my moon to be, and then hold Shift and Alt to make a big circle. And I need to send this backwards. I don't want to send it all the way to the back. So I'm just going to do Control on my keyboard and left bracket to send it behind the mountain. And then I also want to switch my gradient again and potentially stretch this out. Yes, I think that looks good. So then we get something that looks like this. And now our mountain stands out a lot more, right? Okay, so last thing, I promise, we're going to do image trace one more time on our bats. So I gave you guys an image of some bats. Now I want you to notice that I gave you a low quality image on purpose, right? So I gave you a really high quality image for our trees, and I gave you a really low quality image for our bats because I want you to see what happens and how much more extra things you need to do in image trace to make a low quality image look good, okay? So with my bats selected, I'm going to click on image trace. I'm going to click on silhouettes and look at what it did to my bats. This bat lost his ears. These bats, you can't even tell that their wings are curved. Like this one is like all mushy looking. They look like they're like gummy bears that have been left out in the sun for too long. They look kind of melted, right? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn down my threshold a little bit. And then I'm going to give myself more paths and more corners. And you'll notice, look how much better my bats look already, right? All of their ears came back, all of their feet came back, the parts of their wings that are the bottom look sharper, but they're still kind of wonky, right? They're not the best. So this is why image trace doesn't work sometimes, because if you have a lower quality image, this is kind of the best that you're going to get. And it's good. I think it'll work for our purposes, but it's not the best. So you need to make sure you're paying attention to the type of images that you're using. Okay, so I'm gonna, again, don't forget to press expand, because if you don't, you will not be able to edit your image. So I'm gonna press expand here. And then it automatically groups all of the bats together, right? So I'm just gonna go ahead and move them about where they need to be. I want them to look like they're coming out from behind the trees. But even if I do that, my bats right now look a little bit too close together. They look kind of like compact. So what I'm going to do is actually ungroup them. So I'm going to ungroup and click off of them. And now I can move these bats individually to places where they look better. I could rotate them more, have them spread out, have them look like they're more concentrated at the bottom down here. Whatever you want to do to move them around, make them bigger, make them smaller, but make them fit in this space more, right? That just looks better already. Okay, so you can kind of futz with that a little bit, do what you want with it, but this is pretty much what our image is going to look like. So the reason why I'm not worrying about the extra parts that are coming off of my artboard is because they're going to get cut off when I click use artboard, right? So I could spend a lot of time using Shape Builder to delete those, but why would I waste the time when I'm just going to export it as a PNG and cut off those by clicking use artboard anyways, right? So I'm going to click File, Export, Export As. I'm going to make sure it says PNG, and then I'm going to click on Use Artboard, and I'll export it to this one. I got to put it in the right folder. Hang on. Okay, export. And then you also want to make sure that your resolution says high. Your background color could say white, and then you're going to say okay. Now, that does not mean that you should not save it as an Illustrator file as well. I think a lot of people recently have only been exporting and not saving as an Illustrator file, and that's not good. So we're going to do File, Save As, on your computer or on Creative Cloud, or both, honestly. Like, the more places that you save, the better, okay? So save it in more than one place. And that's all we got for today. Make sure you turn it into the Google Classroom. Hope you're doing well, and I'll see you next time.